Welcome to the Maison Française. My name is Phil Watts. I'm the chair of the Department of French. And I'm delighted to welcome you here, those of you who come from near and from far. And I want to extend a special welcome to our distinguished panelists today. And also I want to thank the Film Society at the Lincoln Center, Scott Foundas, and also Delphine Céleste of the Cultural Services of the French Embassy for helping us organize this great event. And the Maison Française, as you know, has always been an important point of contact for artistic communities in France and in New York. And so I'm really happy to continue that tradition with the panel and the round table today. I'll be very brief. I just want to say two things, or three things, or four, but they'll all be brief. So first, this panel is organized in, as you know, in celebration and around what I think is one of the most exciting film movements and one of the most exciting film series in the last few years. This is the Free Radicals, the series titled Free Radicals, Serge Bozon and New French Cinema, a series that began on Wednesday night and that continues through Monday, April 18th. This series centers on films of a collective of filmmakers closely associated with the journal La Lettre du Cinéma, and whose films, as Scott Foundas says in a really wonderful article in this month's Film Comment, whose films are, quote, as highly original and formally and innovative as any group of films circulating today. And I think that's really true. I haven't seen everything, and I'm looking forward to the series, but what I've seen so far is extremely exciting. I don't know if there are programs here for the...
I have some flyers.
Okay, great. So make sure you have, if you don't have already the series, or you can find it on the Lincoln Center, the Walter Reed Theater's website. And also just for the question of language, I think we'll begin in English, but French is always an option, and we have several people here who are ready to translate, so don't hesitate to speak in French or to ask it. I'm happy to translate, and I also want to put you on the spot, but I think you are as well. Okay, so my introduction will be brief, but I just want to identify the panelists. So first, Aurélia who is here, is a graduate of the FEMIS. Her first feature-length film is L'Homme qui marche, The Walking Man, which plays on Monday night, I believe, in the film series, and has won a number of very distinguished prizes, including the Grand Prize at the Women's Film Festival in Cologne. So Monday night, Aurélia, welcome. Benjamin Esdraffo, who is here, studied with the French director Jean-Claude Viette, was Serge Bozon's assistant director for several films, including Mods, is the director of Clarisse's Neck, which plays tomorrow at 5. He's also a composer and composed the music for Serge Bozon's, or co-composed the music for Serge Bozon's La France, which I have to say is the most extraordinary wartime musical I have ever seen in my life. It's just a fantastic film with amazing music. And Benjamin Esdraffo has also written extensively for La Lettre du Cinéma, Trafic, Cahiers du Cinéma as well. Jean-Charles Fitoussi is here, worked for a number of years as the assistant director of Jean-Marie Straub and Daniel Bale. And you've also made a documentary on their work and on their filming of Sicilia, which actually, that film is screening on campus somewhere next week. The Straub and Bale film, yes. So we should screen your documentary as well. Anyway, we can talk about that. And he's the director of several films, 2 of which will be screened at the Walter Reed Theater. So The Days I Don't Exist and I Did Not Die, which screens on Sunday afternoon. There will also be 3 films by Serge Bozon: La France, Mods, which is tonight at 6 p.m. So if you start leaving at 5:30, I know why. And L'Impresario, which is tomorrow. In addition to his works as director, Serge Bozon has acted in several films, including Axel Hotels, The Wahlberg Family, which is part of this series, and Aurélia Georges' The Walking Man. He's also written on cinema in La Lettre du Cinéma, Trafic, Vertigo, and Cahiers du Cinéma. And I should add that part of the originality of this film series this week at the Walter Reed Theatre is that there will also be the screening of several films programmed by Serge Bozon, including films of Jean-Claude Guet and Paul Becchiari's Femme, which is tonight at 8. And I'll add one more note, and that Serge Bozon is also DJing tonight. Is that right? Yes. So I just wanted to mention that. And then for our discussion panel, the discussion will be led by Miriam Bale and Scott Foundas, whom I'm absolutely delighted to welcome. So Miriam Bale is a film critic and programmer who contributes regularly to Film Comment, to VL, to Slant Magazine, and who has organized film series at Anthology, at BAM, and at the San Francisco MoMA, among others. And then Scott Foundas is a former film critic at Village Voice and LA Weekly, and is now Associate Director of Programming at Film Society of Lincoln Center, and a contributing editor at Film Comment. And Scott Foundas is, of course, responsible for bringing this fantastic series to New York, and our distinguished panel to Columbia. And so thank you, Scott, for everything, and welcome everyone to the Maison Française.
Well, I think maybe a good place to begin, now we basically know where everyone is to actually talk a little bit about La Lettre du Cinéma and how it was formed and what the guiding principles were. If there was you would say there was a line, there was a certain group of filmmakers or type of cinema that La Lettre du Cinéma was particularly interested in, and maybe Serge would be a good person to start talking about that.
So in France, we used to have 3 prizes. The Prix Louis Deluc Prize, which still exists, Prix Jean Vigo, which also still exists, and another one, which doesn't exist anymore, which was called the Prix Georges and Ruta Sadoul. Georges Sadoul was a French film critic from the 40s and the 50s, communist film critic, very hated by some of the Cahiers Jaunes critics because he was very much against, for ideological reasons, people like Preminger, like Fuller, like Hawks. Anyway, Emmanuel Giraud, a French film producer, get back the prize in 1995. He got back the prize, I don't know how, and so we decided to have a small informal group of discussion just to select the movie and to write a small catalog for each year's selection. And that's how La Lettre du Cinéma began in 1985 as a small, almost fanzine-like magazine devoted just one issue per year for the forthcoming prize. And then in 1996 there was a first fanzine issue with no publisher, but as a real magazine. And then we found a publisher called Paul Ochotski-Lawrence, who also owns Traffic, another magazine funded by Serge Danet, and which is still running. And at this time, the head of La Lettre du Cinéma was 3 people, so Emmanuel Giraud, the producer that I just talked about, and also Julien Husson, who was a film critic, and Judith Cahen, who is and was a film director and also a critic, and who was produced at this time by Emmanuel Giraud. Those are the 3 guys who really funded it and make it happen. It was not me or Jean-Charles or Benjamin. They were much more definitively helpful than I. So now, concerning the line of La Lettre du Cinéma, so once more it begins regularly as a trimestrial, 3-monthly magazine, and so it began in 1986 and the end was 2005, so almost 10 years. And we had no really a line. It was like a schizophrenic magazine because there was 2 lines. One line was very modernistic, like installation, video, Bill Viola, Douglas Gordon, Pierre Huy, etc. And it was championed by people like Vincent Dieudre, Jean-Charles Macera, Christian Mériot, and there was another line, the line which is more closer to the people invited today, more cinephilic line, with Benjamin, Jean-Charles, etc. And where we wrote about old film and new films. But yeah, speaking of a line would be difficult, at least for me in English. So perhaps if somebody who wants to try it in English, I will give him the mic.
Well, did you all actually, was it through the magazine that you all met each other, or did you know each other beforehand?
I was with Benjamin in high school, so I met him later. And you already, Axel, also, and Jean-Charles I met also before. Except some other people, we already knew each other.
And for anybody who wants to speak to it, I mean, did you feel that the magazine was there a certain void in French film criticism that La Lettre du Cinéma was filling? I mean, since there is Trafic, Cahiers, Positif, what, you know, maybe more than talking about a line, that's sort of a way to get at what the essence was of the writing in this journal.
Perhaps the initial impulse was very simple. It was that the Cahiers du Cinéma have stopped long ago to be a magazine for people who want to make movies. And perhaps there is a kind of special energy that you can find in some magazine when you feel that the people involved, they really wanted to movie, they really wanted to direct some movies. Perhaps it was the case for the early Cahiers, perhaps it was the case for Film Critic during a certain time, or here in New York with the Jonas Mekas in the 60s anyway. So perhaps the void was this, to have really this impulse. And also, but it will be hard in English, we had a kind of distaste for several type of film directors that were who were really championed by everybody in France. So I should explain perhaps who
My audience? or
I don't know. The question is what to do with after the French New Wave. You know, je vais passer au français, hein, ce sera vraiment plus simple. Donc je ne sais pas si quelqu'un voudra bien me traduire. Donc la question c'est le rapport à la modernité. Donc disons les grands cinéastes modernes, disons Antonioni, Resnais, Fellini, Bergman. Je parle non-stop.
Maybe ask if there who would like to.
Yes, actually. Does anyone need a translation? Okay, great. So the question was the relation to modernity with film directors such as Bergman, Antonioni, others.
Ouais. Et la question en particulier, c'est que faire du récit? Est-ce que le récit est quelque chose au fond de désuet ou de l'énergie narrative, la vitalité narrative d'un film? Est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui appartient au passé ou est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui appartient encore au présent?
And what to do with plot, with narration, with narrative energy? Is it something that belongs to the past, or is it something that's still alive in the present?
Et ce qu'on appréciait dans un certain nombre de cinéastes français un peu obscurs des années 70, réunis autour de Paul Vecchiali et son écurie Diagonale.
And what the group appreciated in certain filmmakers from the 1970s, including Paul Vecchiali and
et les cinéastes de son écurie Diagonale qu'il a produit.
and the Diagonal Group. Yeah.
C'est que chez lui, justement, il y avait sans aucune nostalgie un goût pour le récit et plus généralement le goût de l'écriture dans toutes ses formes. Ça veut dire le goût de l'écriture, ça peut être le goût de dialogue divagant, ça peut être les ruptures de ton, ça peut être le fait qu'il y ait des secrets qui circulent et qu'il y ait plein de micro-fictions comme ça autour d'un posture qui se déplace. Enfin bon, voilà, il est comme une espèce disons par rapport à ce que serait un film d'Antonioni ou un héritage d'Antonioni, qui est quelque chose où la narration retrouve une espèce de pulsation un peu joyeuse. Mais bon, c'est compliqué.
Right, so the films of Paul Vecchiali, in contrast to those of Antonioni, for example, foregrounded writing, foregrounded plot, foregrounded the wit of dialogue, foregrounded rupture as a kind of game of imposture. Everything that was writerly is what attracted the group, Serge Bozon's group, or La Lettre du Cinéma.
En particulier, si vous voulez, la question tout simplement, c'est la question de l'humour, par exemple. Les films d'Antonioni sont par exemple pas très drôles, et la question c'est, ce qui n'est pas mal, je ne suis pas adoré, je sais pas, des films de langue qui sont pas drôles du tout, mais c'est, est-ce qu'on peut, comment, je pense que l'humour va de pair avec la question des ruptures de ton. Parce qu'à moins de faire des comédies pures et dures, si vous ne faites pas une comédie, pour qu'il y ait de l'humour à un moment, il faut bien qu'il y ait des ruptures de ton. Donc la question c'est, jusqu'à quel point on peut se permettre encore beaucoup de ruptures de ton dans les films, et même des ruptures de ton maximales, alors qu'il y a tout un cinéma moderne, qui est intéressant par ailleurs, comme celui de Garel, ou inversement celui de Cala, ou celui d'Antonioni, ou celui de Bergman, où il y a assez peu de ruptures de ton, où les choses sont globalement très noires. Mais bon, c'est vraiment pour aller vite.
So the question is, how does one maintain humor in contrast to Antonioni, for example, or in contrast to Bergman and Fitoussi? How does one maintain humor in a film that is not necessarily a comedy? How does one break a tone to inject humor into the film itself when one is not making a comedy?
Et la question des ruptures de ton, c'est quelque chose qui vient du cinéma classique. Par exemple, Elle et lui, An Affair to Remember. You can have the biggest rupture de ton possible, le mélodrame, la tragédie, ou je sais pas si on prend Only Angels Have Wings, the Hawks. The guy dies. There is a very, very sad and moving scene, and just 10 seconds after that scene, there is a very, very comical scene, and nothing is lost in terms of sadness or in terms of joyful nonchalance.
Well, because you mentioned Hawks and McCarry right there, maybe you can also say something about what is the relationship of this group to the Cercle de MacMahon, and maybe for people who don't know what is the Cercle de MacMahon, you can say something about that too.
So in the late 50s, early 60s, there was a small group of cinephiles, French cinephiles, Parisian cinephiles, who had a cinema called the MacMahon. And this group was directed by a guy called Pierre Rissian, who was very influential in the States too. And they had a very peculiar taste that I do like. They championed obscure movie makers who were not discovered by the Cahiers Jaunes, like Le Maire, Tourneur, the first Lozé movies, like Matarazzo in Italy, like Ida Lupino movies. I could go on for hours. So now I skip to French again because it will be too complicated otherwise. So l'essence, disons, du cinéma MacMahonien, c'est un petit peu prétentieux de dire ça comme ça, mais c'est que à la fin des années 50, début des années 60, donc on est à un moment où, sans que les gens se rendent compte, c'est plus ou moins la fin d'Hollywood.
So the essence of the MacMahon cinephilia group at the end of the 1950s is the end of a certain Hollywood, a certain classical Hollywood.
Mais les gens ne le savaient pas à l'époque. Les gens ne le savaient pas à la fin des années 50 que ça allait bientôt s'arrêter.
The people didn't yet know at the end of the 1950s that things were going to stop.
Et si vous prenez certains exemples précis, par exemple The Revolt of Mamie Stover by Raoul Walsh, or perhaps I should take also Exodus by Preminger, or Distant Trumpet by Raoul Walsh, or The Indian Diptych of Fritz Lang. All those movies have something in common. Also Hurry Around the Flag Boys by Lo Macaret. Il y a une forme d'abstraction dans ces films qui fait que, ou also Duane movies, like the Duane movie I'm going to show tomorrow in anthology film archives called Tennessee Partners. Il y a une forme d'abstraction dans ces films qui n'est pas du tout l'abstraction qu'on associe au cinéma moderne.
So there's a form of abstraction in these films, such as The Revolt of Mamie Stover and others, that is not a modernist abstraction.
Oui. Et qui donne en particulier, à certains moments clés des films, une forme de sérénité abstraite.
Which gives to the films sort of abstract serenity.
Oui. Et on a l'impression que les films sont presque gravés dans le marbre, mais toujours à la limite de l'effacement.
And one has the impression that the films are almost carved in stone or carved in marble, but at the very limits of erasure.
Parce que si vous voulez, c'est entre la BD et le marbre. La bande dessinée et le marbre, parce que les histoires sont très très simples.
These films are between comic books and marble.
Vraiment, l'exemple du diptyque indien de Lang est un bon exemple.
The two Indian films of Fritz Lang are the perfect example.
On pourrait dire que c'est un film d'aventure pour enfants, presque.
Adventure films for children.
Et en même temps, il y a une sorte de majesté très très olympienne qui se dégage.
And at the same time, there's an Olympian majesty that comes out of these films. That's part of the films.
Et il y a quelque chose d'un peu funèbre dans le cinéma, en fait.
And there's something deathly or funereal about these films as well.
C'est pas un cinéma dans lequel il y a tant de vitalité que ça. Par exemple, si on prend Raoul Walsh dans les années, je sais pas, dans les années 50, dans les années 40, le cinéma de Walsh était très beaucoup de vitalité. Si on prend John Comanche, par exemple, c'est un film avec beaucoup de vitalité.
So, in contrast, Raoul Walsh's films are films that are full of vitality.
Les années 40.
Films from the 1940s.
Et tandis que si on prend ces films de la fin, Distant Trumpet, son dernier film.
And if you take Distant Trumpet as a counterexample, his last film.
Ben là, on voit bien la différence avec John Comanche, c'est-à-dire on voit quelle est cette sérénité abstraite qui fait que peu à peu, le film à la fois se dévitalise il y a une espèce de grandeur très dans le marbre.
And in Distant Trumpet, you see this contrast with the earlier Walsh, a film that devitalicizes itself, that becomes less vital, and seems to be almost engraved in marble.
Je pourrais continuer.
I'm gonna pass the baton to Miriam in a second, but I just the mention of the funereal tone of those films. It reminds me of something that someone in the audience asked Jean-Charles last night at the Film Society, which is that a lot of the films in this series actually have a funereal tone and deal with death in some way, and they asked, was that a comment on the death of cinema? And I thought that led to an interesting discussion actually about these films actually being in a way, at least for you, Jean-Charles, maybe you can talk about it, and anyone else who wants to say, or actually a reaction against the idea of the death of cinema, which has sort of been was widely written about and popularized by any number of critics and some filmmakers, within the last decade or 2 decades, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Mais disons que nous, quand on a, dans les années 90, quand on a commencé à avoir 15 ans ou 17 ans, et que c'était le moment où Godard et d'autres étaient dans une sorte encore pire que eux, ils étaient conscients et en tout cas ils avaient envie, surtout Godard, que le cinéma s'arrête avec lui. Et donc il y avait toute cette idée. Ah oui.
So in the 1990s when they were young, they were 15 or 17 years old, there was a sense coming from filmmakers, a number of filmmakers, but Jean-Luc Godard in particular, that there was a desire for the death of cinema, and in Godard's case, there was a desire that cinema would die after him.
Il y avait vraiment cette idée théorique de la fin du cinéma, comme Serge Danet, et puis cette vision, disons, hegelienne de l'art, où maintenant on était arrivé on était dans la post-modernité, puis après le cinéma, etc. En ce qui me concerne, mais je pense que c'était quelque chose qu'on partageait tous, c'était juste le signe de leur grande fatigue, et puis qu'ils allaient sûrement mourir bientôt, mais nous, en tout cas, ça me paraissait juste presque un symptôme d'un épuisement.
This group is still just beginning, I think, and to do a series like this is just the beginning. And right now, it's very much what it's reacting to from, as much as what it is. And so, sort of maybe starting to shift into what it is. But what it's reacting from, I think this quote hits on. It says, in comparing Stevenson to Conrad, Romero says, "One of cinema's assets is to have made us more critical of words that sound nice but have little expression, more sensitive to a vigorous style than to a bombastic one, to the verb rather than to the adjective, to intention and movement more than to sensation and state, and to the moral rather than to some nebulous cosmogony." And I think you can use that for the criticism that they're doing, which is so valuable, but also for the films and the films that they're reacting to in the United States and especially in France.
It's a very, very interesting quote that I love very much. To put it in very simple terms, all the directors involved here or in the du cinéma, disons que nous faisons des films qui, je crois, peut-être sont ratés, en tout cas, ils ne sont pas pompeux. Et par exemple, à côté de Stevenson, Conrad a un côté pompeux, même si c'est génial.
So we all make films that may be failures, but they're not pompous. And in comparison with Stevenson and Conrad, this is an important distinction.
I'm interested to ask a rather, a technical question in a way, which is that when you mentioned the hourglass, it reminds me that one of the challenges in putting the series together is that many of the films have an unusual running time. You have films like Maud's and Pierre Léon's The Idiot that are 1 hour. You have several films like A12 and Benjamin's film Clarisse's Neck that are about 45 minutes long.
3 hours.
And then you have Jean-Charles' film that's 3 hours and 10 minutes. And I'm wondering if this is all just completely coincidental, or if there's a reason that the length of a film seems to be very malleable for this group of filmmakers.
I will give the mic to my esteemed colleague, but just one word. The B movies were sometimes 1 hour. Yeah, les films de complément. It's a tradition.
Well, I can hardly answer because I made a film which is 1 hour and 20 minutes now. So, no, I think what I wanted to say about that is that it's in a way unusual, but it's for me a sign of freedom, but it's also it's linked to suffering in a way, because it's hard to release those films, whether they're 1 hour long or 3 hours long. So it makes it more difficult, but at the same time, it's a sign of freedom.
I didn't question myself about the length of my movie. It was just the length it needed, I thought. And there are many films of this length that I think we really like. Or somebody like Jean Eustache made very film from 30 or 40 minutes or maybe less, and like a model and a whole too. There's no. Well,
in short, we should only do 1 hour or 3 hours.
Well,
Aurelia's one is just the first part of this 3 hours.
This may also be a way of getting into the fact that these films in some cases have not been very widely seen in France or even released. In the case of I Did Not Die, not released yet, and maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the producers, some of the festivals, organizations that have been important to making and supporting these films. I know, Aurélia, you were telling me a little bit about the Acide, which I think is not something that people know very much about in this country, and how it's been involved with these films.
Well, the Acide is an association of filmmakers, basically, and existing for almost 20 years. And their first goal was to help other film directors' films to be released. The point of Acide is to help on the theatrical release of films and to accompany films and to make discussions after films to help them being distributed. And for over 15 years, they have also a series in Cannes, which is one of the series that you can see in the Cannes Film Festival. And all our films. I mean, the first film of Serge and the first film of Jean-Charles, my film were screened first in Acide and then in other sections of Cannes later on, where the second and third feature films were screened in the other sections. But often Acide has this option to have, it's a bit more, maybe more open, more free, and that's how films of 1 hour could be shown and then supported through distribution in France. So I guess it's about independent cinema, and it doesn't have there's not a school of Acide. It's just whoever is a director can be a member and support other films that they love. That's what it's about.
Actually, I'd like to continue with that. And this is something that I'm not asking. I have no idea. I'm really curious about some of the ways that you've found funding for your films, and if there are some different. That's always important with the way how you're funding the films.
I'm really impressed by the question, because I want to know what Jean-Charles will answer, because it's such a mystery. Because I think he's got a rich family, hidden somebody somewhere, because it's really mysterious. He makes the longest movies with a perfect technical quality and a beautiful la pellicule est très très belle, il y a un tracking et tout, et c'est un mystère. Par exemple, son film de 3 heures, je ne sais pas du tout qui l'a produit.
Non, le seul secret, c'est que, à défaut d'avoir des financements, j'ai du temps, et donc je n'ai aucune. Ça me paraît bizarre parce que tout le monde me dit.
So my only secret is that because I don't have financing, I have time.
Et j'ai très vite anticipé le fait que je ne gagnerais jamais d'argent avec mes films, que donc il fallait faire un autre métier. Et donc c'est aussi une forme de tranquillité qui fait que j'attends rien commercialement de mes films. Donc
Quel métier?
I very quickly realized that I wouldn't make money with my films, and so therefore there's a kind of tranquility in my ability to make films. And then the question was asked, Fitoussi said that he had to find another job, and then the question was asked what job or what profession he practiced.
I have two kind of I'm programming some cinema and presenting film, and also working as an architect. For example, for I Did Not Die, j'espère que tu sais maintenant. C'est quand voilà, le film se fait petit à petit. Il n'y a pas de secret. C'est simplement, contrairement aux productions plus traditionnelles, vous êtes toujours pris par le temps, il faut aller vite, et bien là c'est un peu le contraire. C'est d'abord une équipe de gens qui sont devenus des amis, et c'est une manière comme de partir en vacances et de faire un plan, même si ça doit prendre 3 jours, jusqu'à ce qu'il atteigne une perfection. Voilà, avec vraiment tout le temps possible, y compris des périodes parfois où j'attends pendant 1 an pour qu'il y ait de nouveau un peu d'argent économisé, ou des choses comme ça.
So,
et en fait, voilà,
maybe I can. Sorry, I don't mean to. Just so now you know. I Did Not Die was made little by little. There's no secret. Contrary to traditional production schedules, we're not working under duress. We were a group of friends almost on vacation. A shot can take as long as 3 days to get it just right.
Et puisqu'il n'y a personne, puisqu'il n'y a aucune société qui a investi de l'argent, aucune banque, aucune télévision, du coup, il n'y a aucune demande non plus pour récupérer cet argent, ce qui fait que le film peut ne pas sortir. Parce que si les films sortent, c'est parce que les financiers veulent, c'est pas parce qu'ils veulent montrer le film, c'est parce qu'ils veulent récupérer leur investissement.
So since there's no production company, since there's no bank or television involved, there's also no demand for money to recoup, and therefore there's no real necessity for the film to come out, because if the film comes out, it's simply because investment company wants to recoup its investment.
Et c'est donc peut-être ça c'est un de mes problèmes, mais qui me conduirait normalement chez un psychanalyste, c'est que moi, une fois que le film est fait, je suis content et ça ne me manque pas qu'il ne sorte pas. Donc il y a toujours Serge qui m'envoie des mails ou me téléphone pour savoir quand le film va sortir, et je ne sais jamais quoi lui répondre, parce que en fait, fondamentalement, j'ai confiance dans le fait que ce film sortira un jour, et la date précise de ce jour ne m'importe pas vraiment.
So it might be a problem, and it might be a problem I need to work out with a psychoanalyst. But once the film is made, I'm very happy. I'm not concerned so much with the release of the film. Serge Bozon writes to me and asks me about the release date, but I'm not concerned.
I should add.
J'ai confiance dans le
Oh yes, sorry, the most important part, I'm sorry, that I'm also confident in the life of the film once it is made, that it will come out and that it will be screened and will be shown.
I mean, it's not important if it's 2008 or 208 or 3000. I don't care, because it's I mean, it's in a safe place, so maybe in 200 years, someone can screen it.
Jean-Charles is a Zen Buddhist of the group, the Japanese Zen Buddhist. And I should also add that his film, made in 2008, is having its North American premiere Sunday at 5, and I think it's a really remarkable masterpiece. It's definitely the most ambitious of this series, and it's. I'd like to ask you a little bit more about it. Yeah.
Juste parce que ça peut paraître une sorte de théorie, ce que je viens de dire, parce qu'il n'y en est pas du tout une, au sens où c'était juste les circonstances qui ont fait que ce film s'est fabriqué comme ça. Mais il peut y avoir de très grands avantages et de grands plaisirs à faire un film très rapidement. C'est quelque chose que j'aimerais beaucoup faire aussi. Simplement, ça ne s'est pas présenté. Ou alors, une fois pour un moyen métrage qui s'appelle Le Dieu Saturne.
So, just to clarify, what I just said was not a theory. Circumstances made that my film took a long time and was made this way, but there can also be a great pleasure in making a film very quickly. One example is
Le Dieu Saturne.
Le Dieu Saturne,
It was
a medium format film.
yes, medium format. It was produced by TV Arte, and it was a kind of series. And one of the director, I don't know what happened, but maybe he died. I don't know. So I was there were 15 directors, but one of them disappeared, and I was the 16th. So I've been called, and the production asked me, could you give me a script next week? I say yes, okay. I wrote it very quickly, and then two months ago we were shooting, and it was finished 1 month later. So I also like it very much, and that I must say that maybe it's also one of our ideal would be to make much more film than we make, and not waiting so long. It may be a contradiction with what I said before, but in fact it's not. But I will not explain why.
I'm wondering, just to go back actually to something, I mean, we talked a lot about, filmmakers, schools of criticism, but I'm wondering if there's there seems to be a particular affinity between these films and literature, in the sense that Aurélia's film is about a writer and about Parisian literary circles, and Maud's has this running discussion about intellectualism versus physical forms of valor and proving one's worth. And Jean Charles' film, The Days I Don't Exist, is inspired by a short story by Marcel Aimé that was itself inspired by some notes in a journal by Nathaniel Hawthorne. So can you talk a little bit about this rapport, as it were?
Juste pour ajouter encore quelque chose sur cet idéal de tourner beaucoup, qui fait qu'au fond on rêverait d'être des salariés d'une major. Personnellement, je trouve que c'est un statut très, très enviable de savoir que quoi qu'on fasse, on a 1 ou 2 films à faire par an, et ça peut, du coup, on peut se permettre même de rater, de faire des petites choses sans. Voilà, c'est quelque chose dont on a une sorte de nostalgie.
So just one more word on this ideal of filming a lot and filming quickly. We in fact dream of being employees of a major studio. The thought that one could make 1 or 2 films a year allows for a certain freedom, and in particular the freedom perhaps to make a film that's a failure and then know that one can make a new film.
And for I Did Not Die, I had to, it took 4 years, so it could seem very long, but 4 years for a really independent movie, it's not so long. But even with the French production now, you have to wait for 4 years. So it's so long. I think it's too long. Even Serge and Aurélia, they were working with real production companies. It's not so. They are not faster. So, but they are waiting so.
It's part of that weight, is there, I mean, again, this goes back to the funding and production. It's a certain government funding, or is it just the production companies itself? What's the weight? Is it the funding? No?
Yeah, no production companies. I mean, the ones we work with, they don't have money of their own that they would invest in the film, except maybe a little bit on the writing sometimes. Correct me if I'm wrong. They would invest a little bit on the rewriting, let's say, on part of the writing. No, it's a lot of public funding, and it's TV channels and regional funding and distributors that would put maybe a little bit of money before.
But 19% is state funding from
90.
que ce soit les régions, que ce soit le CNC, le fonds, tout ça, c'est de l'argent public.
Public funding.
Can you talk a little bit about the regional funding? Because I think La France and also the Wolfer family, maybe I'm wrong, were filmed in different parts of France for regional funding. Is that true?
Oui, donc il y a un système en France pour obtenir l'argent des régions, et c'est au final l'argent étatique, ce qui suppose, pour certaines d'entre elles, mais pas toutes, d'aller filmer dans les régions.
So there's a system in France which makes regional funding available to filmmakers, which presupposes, in some cases, that one film in the region that is funding a film.
Mais pour reprendre ce que disait Jean-Charles, qui est important, la question du temps de latence entre les films.
But the question that Jean-Charles raised about the wait for a film to be made to come out.
Je ne pense pas qu'il faut croire que l'envie de tourner plus souvent relève d'une forme d'enfantillage ou comme ça, du désir d'avoir ses jouets toute la journée.
So the desire to film more quickly and to film more often is not a sort of infantile wish to have to play with one's toys.
C'est au contraire quelque chose qui vient de la critique de cinéma, de la cinéphilie.
It's something that is a result of film criticism and cinephilia.
C'est-à-dire, quand vous regardez, par exemple, Godard, Fassbinder, Guitry, Ulmer, leur meilleure période, c'est quand ils faisaient au moins 3 films par an.
So the proof is that filmmakers such as Guitry, Godard, Fassbinder, Ulmer all made, in their best periods, were all making 3 films a year.
C'est juste qu'on a, we forgot the Scott's question. So, and his question reminds me that about Romer. Romer is often, en français, on parle toujours, dès qu'un film a des dialogues écrits, on appelle ça un film romérien, et dès qu'on est dans un film français où des jeunes filles parlent, c'est un film romérien, peut-être, mais...
So as soon as, on the word on Romer, as soon as a film has written or writerly dialogues, we say it's a film in the style of Romer. As soon as there's a film in which young women are speaking, we say it's a film made by Romer, or in the style of Romer.
Et d'ailleurs, on dit souvent que les films de Romer sont des films littéraires, peut-être, mais une des choses les plus belles des films de Romer, ce sont, on peut dire, les backgrounds, l'arrière-plan, et cet attachement à filmer la réalité. Là encore, Serge parlait de la clarté du récit, mais il y a aussi la transparence de sa manière de filmer, qui fait que il n'y a que Romer pour avoir filmé Serge Pontoise ou dans Les Nuits de la pleine lune aussi, le fait d'habiter en banlieue. Enfin, et c'est-à-dire ce qui est très très, finalement, ce qui reste, je trouve, chez Romer, c'est un sentiment très fort de la réalité et qui n'appartient qu'au cinéma.
So we often say that Romer is somehow, we often associate Romer with the literary, but in fact what is also very beautiful in Romer's films is the beauty of the background in his films, or the real, the clarity of his pictures, the clarity of his style. Only Romer could have filmed the suburbs of Paris in such a beautiful way. Only Romer could have filmed Serge Pontoise in such a way. What remains of Romer's films is also a sentiment for reality that is proper to cinema itself.
Un de mes films préférés de Romer, c'est justement L'ami de mon ami. Et comment dire, c'est comme si il y a une expression en français qui est de faire du cinéma, qui est une expression négative. Et on parle toujours, sur un tournage, tout le monde dit on va tricher ça, on va faire du cinéma, on va faire fake things. Et dans L'ami de mon ami, il montre des choses, une vie vraiment affreuse. Et ça, par la magie romérienne, ça devient pas plus beau, mais c'est juste plein de, je dirais, un sentiment de gratitude qu'il y a dans tous ces films pour le fait que le simple fait que Serge Pontoise existe, même si c'est moche.
So one of my favorite films to illustrate this is L'ami de mon ami, which is boyfriends and girlfriends. There's an expression in French which is faire du cinéma, which is always or often negative or derogatory, and one uses it on the set as an equivalent of somehow cheating. And yet, if you see boyfriends and girlfriends, Serge Pontoise, this awful suburb, it's not that it's prettified. It's not that it's made to be something that it's not. It's that Romer is expressing a gratitude that Serge Pontoise is there. It's simply there, even if it's ugly.
C'est d'ailleurs une autre différence qui nous oppose pour l'instant assez profondément à Romer, c'est que les films de Romer, au niveau de ce qui s'y passe, sont pleins dans la société ordinaire. Tandis que les films de Jean-Charles, les miens, ceux d'Aurélia, ceux de Benjamin, ceux de Pierre-Léon, sont toujours finalement sur des gens qui, de manière ou d'une autre, sont asociaux, sont à côté de la société, ça peut être des déserteurs, ça peut être... il n'y a pas une vie sociale ordinaire avec des gens qui travaillent, qui gagnent leur vie. Il y a quelque chose où on est un peu plus dans un no man's land économique.
So one difference with Romer is that Romer's films are always in society and about people who are in society. Our films are, for the most part, about asocial characters. There's no ordinary social life in our films. They're films that take place in the sort of no man's land.
Mais un point commun, je crois, c'est que à part dans nos films, moi en tout cas dans les films, d'autres films français, la production habituelle, je suis toujours à la recherche de la moindre indice de réalité, d'amour de la réalité que je ne trouve pas. Et quand je vois un décor, je vois juste le travail du décorateur. Alors que chez Romer, ce qui est très beau, c'est que on se dit, voilà, on sait exactement comment était Serge Pontoise à ce moment-là. Ces films ont tout de suite une grande valeur presque documentaire. Et de même, si on veut savoir, quand on voit Mods, on sent que Serge a pris la cité universitaire comme il l'a trouvée. Dans la France, on voit les paysages de la France. Dans L'homme qui marche, c'est le vrai Paris, etc. Je pense qu'on montre peut-être des gens qui sont un peu hors de la société au sens social du terme, mais ils sont quand même dans des lieux qui existent.
A common point with Romer, unlike most French films, unlike most of the production of the French film industry, where I often look for but cannot find signs of a love of reality, the love of reality that one finds in Romer. When I see a film from the ordinary French production, I don't see a landscape, I see a set designer, I see the work of a set designer. But in Romer's film, what we see of Serge Pontoise, of the French suburb, is what was really there at the time that the film was made. There's a kind of documentary evidence in Romer that's important. Same thing with our films, same thing with films such as Mods, where we really see a campus, same thing with films such as La France, where we really see landscapes of France, same thing with The Walking Men, where we see the real Paris, our characters, maybe asocial or antisocial, but the world they live in is real.
I also would like to remark that I'll stay stuck on Romer for another minute, but it's also very appropriate because Scott Foundas' first major program at the Film Society was a complete Romer retrospective. and now he's doing this series, which is also very impressive. So it's nice to have the connection. I'll say I'd like to read this quote of Romero on Hawks that I think is related to something that Jean-Charles said last night about again this production gap, and something related to his film The Days I Don't Exist, which someone is there and then they disappear. And he talked again about the lapse in between. He was so interested in that in cinema, and that it's related to the lapse in between one film to the next. And one thing that's interesting is even though the talk of the frustration of that long gap between films is brought up, it's not like someone in Hollywood who's just waiting and then makes another film that's exactly the same. Again, this is a new movement, but the most mature films in La France, and I Did Not Die, you see in them the lessons. The criticism is continued in that gap. And so by the later films here, it's not a continuation, but there are new lessons. And I think one of the things where you really see the lesson is, even though there's criticism, but it's very serious criticism. It's not just quoting, like a Tarantino. It's not just looking at other films and making references and allusion. To illustrate, let me read this quote of Romero and Hawks. I know of no other director who is more indifferent to plasticity, but whose shooting script is more ordinary. But in exchange, who is more sensitive to the exact outline of a movement, to its exact duration. And I think in these most mature works, it's what's most remarkable are these very subtle things. I think in La France, there's the framing and the editing. It's very specific and very interesting, and all of those lessons of the criticism in between is there. And in I Did Not Die, it's something very remarkable, the lessons of, you mentioned some American lessons in the first film, but I see also lessons of Romer and Godard and René, but the familiar shots, like a shot on a balcony or on a bed or on the Seine, that's very familiar, but then extended, and so it becomes unfamiliar. And it's very remarkable. I mean, isn't that a question, a statement? Would you like to remark on that? The gap in between, or I guess what I'm saying is that's about that growth and where it's gone.
Il y a une question. Related to your own question, there is a kind of difference between Jean-Charles and I, and that I think is interesting. That's, I love, for example, Robert Bresson. I love Jean-Marie Straub. I love Manuel de Oliveira. I could quote a lot of very modernist film directors, but I try to escape their influences when I'm doing movies. I try to go back, if I may say so, to the same, references that the French New Wave originally had. And Jean-Charles is trying really directly to deal with Godard, for example, in his movies, or Straub. And I also think very interesting the way that you can recognize very clearly, for example, the influence of Godard. But something happens, especially with avec la longueur qui prend le film, peu à peu, il y a une sorte de voix propre qui s'ouvre et qui est très différente, et il y a une espèce de côté comme une espèce de messe joyeuse qui n'est pas du tout godardienne, même un peu enfantine.
So, but something happens, I like Godard very much, but something happens with the length of the film. It develops a voice of its own. It's sort of a joyous, infantile, a joyous mass, an infantile moment. A joyous mass, an infantile joyous mass, Miss Joyeuse.
Well, maybe for Benjamin, who's been the quiet one here, and for Serge to talk a little bit about the role of music. I mean, particularly in Serge's films, although the Wahlberg family is a music-rich film. Some of these films have very little music. It's not exactly a through line, but because of the very interesting, I think, in Mods and La France is the kind of disconnect between the period of the music and the period of the film. Although Mods, I don't think we really know when it's taking place, so it could be that it's in that period. But in La France, certainly you have music of the 60s against World War I film, and if you would talk a little bit about the interest in the musical form, and then why this kind of music put into this story.
Yes, I will give the mic to Benjamin, but first I will continue the tradition of answering the question from 1 hour ago. Again, about this Mystery Angelica case of yours and the question of the deep relation between movies and phantoms. And what I think very interesting that, first, once more, I agree that there is a deep connection, very natural connection, and that usually the ghost movies is a very pure essence of movies and little everywhere. But if you look now at the Oliveira movie, I think that the dream scene where he's sleeping and he dreams that he is flying with this dead girl, I think those scenes are not very good. So why? Because precisely he tries to illustrate directly something that is much more deeply, naturally souterrain. Underground. So I think, for example, in this movie, les discussions à l'auberge de famille le matin, au petit déjeuner, ou bien les scènes avec la bonne, un petit peu sarcastique, Isabelle Root.
So the conversations in Oliveira's movie, the conversations at the family inn, the conversations with the maid.
Non, des conversations, au petit déjeuner dans une pension de famille.
Yeah, the breakfast scene in family inn.
Et les conversations avec une bonne un peu revêche jouée par Isabelle Root.
The conversations with the maid played by Isabelle Root.
Oui, en quelque chose de plus fort que ces scènes d'illustration de rêverie fantomatique.
There's something much stronger in those scenes than in the dream sequences in Oliveira's film.
Parce qu'à nouveau, comme pour Romer, on a un tout autre sens.
Because as with once again, as with the Romer film, there's another meaning, another sense that comes out.
Oliveira est très intéressé par la question de la sociabilité.
Oliveira is interested in the sociability question, and the question of sociability.
C'est-à-dire les questions, vous savez, de gens qui se rencontrent au petit déjeuner, qui font pas les mêmes métiers, qui se connaîtront jamais, mais qui doivent discuter comme ça de sujets pendant une demi-heure.
People who don't know each other but who meet at breakfast and have to discuss, have to speak with each other.
Et j'ai l'impression qu'il touche plus à son cinéma dans ce qu'il a de propre que dans les moments où il essaye d'affronter de manière finalement assez littéraire ce qui est quelque chose de cinématographique qui est le rapport au fantôme.
And these scenes are much closer to what is proper to Oliveira's cinema than the moments when he tries to inject ghost scenes or dream sequences into his film.
Qui finalement paraissent plus littéraires que le reste.
Which are more literary, or we seem more literary than the rest of the
Alors qu'il n'y a pas un dialogue dans ces scènes, c'est juste des images.
even though there's no dialogue.
Et pour la musique, I give the mic to Benjamin.
No, I cannot answer about the role of the music in your film. I can only talk about my experience with working with you on La France, because for Modes it was recorded existing music. For La France there was this kind of 60s very obscure genre, English kind of music called pop cycle, for pop and psychedelism. With a group like
Do you want me to give some groups?
yeah,
You know, like all the John Country subgroups, like Little Girl Lost and Found, like the Kingsmen, not the Kingsmen, the Kingsmen, double N. Glasses Green, Splitterhead, all the things you can find on the Rebel compilation.
it's like a very fairy tale kind of thing, a bit Carol.
Lewis Carroll,
yes,
and
Lewis Carroll.
Northern rhythms from 19th century, Victorian Northern
Yeah, that's
rhythms.
very good. And so Serge asked us, he gave us some lyrics, very strange lyrics, and we had to find some tunes. And I worked with a person called Médizanal, who has a group called Foundas, and we mainly worked together to try to fit with what Serge wanted for the movie. And one of the other things to do too was we couldn't have all the instruments of the music, which was our reference, because of course the pop side is with the drums, with bass and electric instruments, and we knew that the music should be played in the middle of nowhere, in the nature, with folk instruments. So we had to
Not folk instruments, but homemade instruments, like the soldiers really did during the First World War, even if it was to play chamber music.
yeah. and it couldn't be big instruments either because of course they're supposed to hide, the soldiers are supposed to hide the
But you
instruments.
played piano in a scene.
Yes, we're supposed to have found a piano in one sequence. And so we had to deal with this kind of things, and the result, of course, sounds more folk than I think.
That's strictly technical sound, but the type of sound aesthetically is still pop.
Yeah, it's still pop because of the harmonies and I think that because we try to be this kind of music. There was something I wanted to say. I forgot.
Une particularité de nos films en ce qui concerne la musique, c'est qu'il n'y a pas de musique de film à proprement parler. La musique est jouée à l'intérieur des films et elle a un rôle narratif. Je ne vais pas parler de mes films, mais c'est ce qui, ça, pour le coup, c'est quelque chose qui peut-être secrètement nous rapproche un peu tous, mais dans la musique, elle a toujours ce rôle de, même si elle est mélancolique, même si elle est triste, de redonner une forme de force, disons de force. Dans Mods, la guérison s'opère grâce à une toute petite mélodie entendue par la fenêtre. Je vais essayer.
So one of the specificities of music in our films is that there's no real film music that is from a soundtrack from outside put onto the film. Music in our films always plays a significant role in the narrative. Even if this music is sad, even if this music is melancholy, it gives a force, a certain force back to the narration, back to the story of the film. One example is Mods, when the sick character gets well, thanks to music, thanks to melody that he hears.
Et si vous voyez la France, vous voyez qu'à chaque fois qu'ils sont dans une situation de découragement ou périlleuse, la musique va les aider. Ouais. En voyant la France, j'ai beaucoup pensé encore à quelque chose, pour le coup, d'assez à la fois tragique et enfantin, comme dans Magic Flute, comme dans la flûte enchantée de Mozart. Et les 4 moments musicaux de la France sont vraiment... J'avais pas vu son film quand je faisais le mien, mais I Did Not Die, mais en fait il y a des grands points en commun sur la puissance musicale.
So another example is La France, where each time there's a moment of discouragement, the music or the songs help the soldiers. And I was reminded in this of the Magic Flute, in which music plays a role that is both tragic and infantile. I hadn't seen La France when I was making my film, but there are some strong similarities in the way music figures in both the films.
Et ça nous ramène à notre amour pour les films, à la fois les films hollywoodiens classiques et les films de l'école diagonale de Vecchiali, dans lesquels on se donne la liberté de chanter, même si on est dans un tramway, je pense par exemple à Once More, ou même et à son école, à Guiguet. Enfin. Et cette liberté-là était complètement absente du cinéma français, dans lequel ce fameux bouillon morbide, dans lequel on a aussi, moi j'avais l'impression que tous ces cinéastes étaient vraiment des cinéastes un peu sourds, non seulement à la réalité, mais à la musique. Et peut-être c'est la même chose.
So this love of music in our films reconnects us to the love of certain Hollywood films and also the diagonal movement of Vecchiali. There's a love of song and a freedom to sing in their films that we were attracted to, and this love of song and this freedom to sing had been totally excluded from the morbid soup of a previous generation of French filmmakers.
Ce qu'il faut préciser, what I want to precise is, tonight, if you want to see Femme Femme, the masterpiece of Vecchiali, there is some singing in it, and it's also recorded live. Everything is recorded live, just like in La France. And what is very important also is that Jean-Charles was right by telling this. Vecchiali was very alone
after Jacques Demy by trying to continue this French musical tradition. He was very, very old, and what is interesting is that he was, as a young teenager, very close to Eustache, Jean Eustache. He even produced the first 2 short movies of Jean Eustache, Le Père Noël à les yeux bleus et Le Mot de Fréquentation. It's Bekele who produced those movies. But Jean Eustache and Paul Bekele were completely on the opposite side from an aesthetical point of view. And after the first feature of Paul Bekele, Jean Eustache stopped talking to Paul Bekele because he found that so awful that he couldn't dare to speak with him again. Precisely because of that, in France, there is a much more deep Eustache tradition. I mean, with realistic stories, ordinary love story about ordinary people, and very few people, except Bekele, try to escape or to take the maximal risks with naturalism, if I may say so. Bekele perhaps was the main opposant against naturalism. He was the only one to be so strongly anti-naturalistic in the 70s.
À cet égard, il faudrait montrer en même temps que Femme-Femme, il faudrait montrer La Maman et la Putain, qui était dans la même année, en noir et blanc. Et
so, on this note, one along with Femme-Femme, one should show Eustache's La Maman et la Putain, which was from the same year.
And black and white, both of them with a lot of dialogues between the female characters. And now, of course, La Maman et la Putain is the classic 70s French movie, and it's a beautiful movie. But I think the last classic is Femme-Femme, and really, in terms of methodology, I think it's much more inspiring. And Eustache can be very dangerous, because there is something perverse in his cinema, and very, very perverse. And lui-même dégage quelque chose d'assez pervers, il y a quand même quelque chose de suicidaire dans ce cinéma.
There's something perverse and suicidal in Eustache's films.
Et inversement, il y a quelque chose de très solaire chez Bekele.
And there's something very solar,
Presque dionysiaque.
Dionysiac in Bekele's films.
I think after this we'll see if there's some questions from the audience. But I wanted to ask everybody actually a little bit about a rather fascinating exhibition that was staged at the Centre Pompidou last fall by Serge, but which I think everybody on the panel participated in one way or another, called Faubourg Le Dernier Major, with well, I'll actually let Serge maybe give a little background of what this was, and I'm particularly interested to hear people's opinions about whether this was a kind of an important moment in terms of the profile of this group, even though it was not specifically about your work as filmmakers.
As I already told it to somebody in the audience, we didn't try to do it as a way of showing our own work. No film of us has been screened there. Not La France, not the film of Jean-Charles, the film of Aurélia, the film of Roger. On the contrary. So I made it with Pascal Baudet, a friend of mine who also wrote extensively for La Lettre du Cinéma and who is also a director. And the idea, I will skip to French again because it's quite complicated. So, Bobo la dernière majeure, c'était 10 jours à Beaubourg dans le sous-sol.
So, Bobo la dernière majeure was 10 days in the basement of Bobo, the Pompidou Center of Bobo.
Yeah, a decade each day. So a century of cinema, you can translate it to French. And the idea was to do a history of cinema, but the contrary of Godard. I mean, donc une histoire artisanale du cinéma, au sens où il s'agissait à chaque fois de trouver, pour donner un exemple tout simple, un cinéaste mort, un cinéaste vivant, et une question artisanale sur laquelle le cinéaste vivant pourra interroger le cinéaste mort. Une question artisanale, je veux dire des questions vraiment de fabrication, c'est-à-dire pourquoi il a utilisé le son de telle manière, pourquoi il a utilisé des effets spéciaux de telle manière. Et c'est l'idée d'essayer de faire une histoire artisanale du cinéma français. Enfin, je vais redire après.
So the point was to make a history of cinema that would be run counter to Godard's history of cinema, and really to emphasize an artisanal history of cinema with one dead filmmaker and one living artisan of film. And
Et le vivant devait interroger le mort juste sur la question précise.
Right, and the living, the alive human had to ask a question of the film about or of the filmmaker about specifically artisanal film, a question related specifically to the artisanal fabrication of the film. Why use a certain sound? Why use certain special effects in this film?
To give again the example of Becali, so we had Paul Becali living, 81 years old, who made something on Jean Grémillon, one of the great film directors, but not about Jean Grémillon in general, but about a very specific point in Jean Grémillon's movie, which is called in French, Le don des larmes, the gift of tears. I mean, why in melodrama the audience is supposed to cry? At which moments in narrative part, what shall you do to make them cry? And is also the characters also supposed to cry? Or for example, Marie-Claude Treilloux, I'm going to present a movie, her first movie called Simone Barbès, which is a masterpiece. Marie-Claude Treilloux was there to talk about Marcel Pagnol, but not Marcel Pagnol in general, but just the way the monologues of Pagnol are written. For example, in Angèle, the scene with Fernandel and Oran de Mazis. Angèle, I don't know if you have seen this movie, it's beautiful. So we had all these things running, but also we had musical sets. Also, I made a very short movie, almost no-budget movie, very, very minimalistic there, which will be screened by Scott in a little film center called L'Impresario, but it was made for TV. And it's a really, really rough movie in video. There was also a selection of American movies, Macmillan movies, essentially, et il y avait l'idée de faire comme si vous voulez une sorte que l'histoire du cinéma français avait besoin d'une espèce de contrepoids, comme un retour du boomerang américain.
So the point was to include American movies from the Macmillan tradition as a sort of counterweight to the history of French cinema.
Mais comme un retour du boomerang.
Oh, as a sort of return of the boomerang.
Parce qu'il y a une relation assez profonde finalement dans le fait que les seuls critiques qui ont parlé à Beaubourg des Majeurs, c'était des Macmillaniens, mais par contre c'était des cinéastes qui parlaient pour le cinéma français.
So the only critics who spoke at the Beaubourg show were Macmillan, or critics associated with the Macmillan tradition.
Alors que c'était des cinéastes qui parlaient pour le cinéma français.
Whereas those filmmakers who were speaking for the filmmakers rather than critics who were speaking for the French film.
Et du même coup, il y avait un échange en non simultané entre les critiques et les cinéastes, mais qui est devenu simultané lors de la soirée de clôture, où les critiques devaient intervenir non pas sur les cinéastes qu'ils auraient découverts, non pas sur les courants qu'ils auraient découverts, mais sur ce qui serait à chaque fois le point aveugle de leur écriture, c'est-à-dire ce sur quoi ils auraient achoppé, ce sur quoi ils se seraient plantés.
So there was a kind of simultaneous exchange between the films, between the critics and the filmmakers until the closing night, when then they were asked to speak on precisely the problems against which which had tripped them up in their.
Yeah, their failure as critic. It was an homage to United Red Army, a Wakamatsu movie, where people have to make autocritic. But such strong autocritic that you're going to die after this. So the critic had to, they were asked to make their autocritic, but the strongest autocritic possible, and then to fall on the floor. And there was simultaneously a song composed during the pause when the body falls down. And it was all inspired really by the question of Maoism, because in French, the Cahiers du Cinéma, which is still the main magazine, went through a very hardcore Mao period and almost disappeared. At this time, there was an almost suicidal auto-killing by the Cahiers du Cinéma, and Jean Arbonny was there to talk about this, the way the Maoism grew into the Cahiers du Cinéma and almost devoured itself. Je peux dire deux choses sur Beaubourg, mais je ne vais pas abuser quand même. Donc oui, ce qui serait bien, c'est que chacun dise ce qu'ils ont fait à Beaubourg. Aurélia, Charles et Benjamin. Benjamin a fait tous les choses.
Yeah, I was more employed as a musician because I'm a musician. So Serge asked me almost impossible thing that was to sing every morning the program of the day by myself. And then I was there a lot as an audience because I thought it was like a cinema academy with Pierre and Barbara. And I was involved in two shows. One was a song conference about cinema of the 30s.
Especially the songs.
And more specifically the songs inside the cinema of the 30s, because there was a lot by this time. And there was a talk, like a conference, and from time to time we showed clips or we sang the song. And one of the show was about Brecht in cinema. It was Bertolt Brecht, it was actually a show of songs by Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht. I was on the piano, and Pierre Léon, whose films are shown here, was a singer, and there were some edited clips in the background of films by Jean Renoir, Maurice Barnett, Adolfo Arrieta.
Max of Fools, La Fière s'est vendue, the first opera movie. Carl Smetana, c'est l'opéra de Carl Smetana, avec La Fière s'est vendue, avec Karl Valentin. Il y avait, and during the show, Pierre Léon, there was a movie.
Mystery of Les Mystères d'un salon de coiffure. That's a film. Yeah, in the middle of the show, there was one film made by Brecht and. Well, there are two to made a film.
Not Cul Vamper. The other.
Les Mysteries of Ersene. That's what I meant there.
I think I was in the one decade where there was not a dead filmmaker and a live one, because it was the years 2000, so yeah, there were live directors. That decade was, the concept brought up by Serge was that Patricia Mazui, a French film director who directed Saint-Cyr and a couple of other movies, was to discover film clips of 5 or 6 young film directors, 3-minute long clips, and she had never seen the film. She just screened and saw the 3 minutes selected, I think, by Serge, and she was supposed to ask us in front of the audience, why we made those directing choices and how we shot it, and why did we choose this angle or this way of shooting, but without knowing anything about the film. So that was kind of challenging, interesting, and we didn't die after that, so I'm quite happy.
As for me, the dead director was Jean-Claude Biette, and Serge found, thanks to the actor Jean-Christophe Bouvet, maybe, I don't know if you know him.
He plays the farmer in La France, for example.
He also plays in Benjamin's film, and he had a kind of what we call making of
One Manhattan. The film was
Far from Manhattan by Jean-Claude Biette. And then when you see a making of, what do you see? You see people waiting. Always. If someone goes on a set, he has this very strange feeling that everybody is waiting and never work. So maybe the idea is that waiting is the real work of making a film. So he asked me to do something about this, and since I'm really interested in intervals and the time between two events, I made a kind of short film with Jean-Christophe Bouvet about the way of the fact of waiting for something, because it's not at all like in Beckett's play.
And I was very, very happy with this, because Jean-Jacques Fitoussi, or Raoul Ruiz, or Pierre Léon, or Laurent Perrin, and many others, they really made new movies especially for this. And Jean-Jacques' movie, it's a short movie, but it's, I think, 45 minutes long, so it's still, I was very happy that the artisanal stuff was not only like talking, singing, dancing, but by really making movies for the occasion. And for example, Raoul Ruiz made a movie about Jean Painlevé, a scientific French film director, and the movie of Raoul Ruiz is 52 minutes long, and for me it's really a masterpiece, the movie of Raoul Ruiz. Very funny and very strange. Le point de départ, c'est tout simple, c'est que quand on regarde des aquariums, eh bien on peut se poser la question du nombre de poissons.
So the starting point of Louise's film on Jean Painlevé is very simple. When one looks at an aquarium, one can ask oneself the question about how many fish there are.
Et quand on y retourne le lendemain, on se pose la même question, mais on se rend compte qu'on ne tombe pas sur le même nombre.
And when you go back the next day, you ask yourself the same question, but the answer is different. The number of fish.
Donc Rui se demande où sont passés les poissons manquants, ou d'où viennent ceux qui arrivent en plus.
So Ruiz asked the question, where did the missing fish go, or where did the additional fish come from?
Et à partir de ça, il se lance dans une rêverie à la fois scientifique et surréaliste autour justement du cinéma animalier de Jean Pain-Levé.
And from there, he goes off on a surrealist, he makes a surrealist film, asking the questions raised by the scientific questions raised by Jean Pain-Levé.
Jean Pain-Levé qui faisait des films justement animaliers, en particulier des films sur un poisson comme la pieuvre.
So, the scientific films about animals from Jean Pain-Levé.
C'est juste la vérification de la possibilité de ce rêve qu'on a, de cette dernière major, ce rêve d'une major. Et Serge a montré avec Beaubourg qu'avec même très peu de moyens, en fait, il y avait tellement de monde qu'il y avait du coup très peu de moyens pour faire, qu'en 10 jours, il y a eu comme ça une sorte de comme un bouton de fièvre très créatif en France, et qui montre qu'en fait, c'est pas du tout compliqué de faire une nouvelle major, il suffit juste de vouloir.
So the show at Beaubourg was a sort of verification of the possibility of a last major or of a last major without much funding. There were nonetheless there were huge crowds that came, and there was this sort of fever pitch, a creative fever, which showed that in France, even without much funding, it's possible to create a significant effect.
À condition de le vouloir, et le fait que ça n'existe plus, c'est simplement que les gens ne le veulent plus. Et que peut-être que cet amour du cinéma qui nous habite n'est peut-être pas distribué spatialement de manière uniforme.
And there's one condition, it's that one must want to do this, and one does not always want to do this. And the result, or the conclusion might be that the love or the desire of cinema is not necessarily uniformly distributed.
Any questions? Questions from the audience? Yes.
Very interested. How do you choose your actors, and how much freedom are they allowed within the movie?
It's a question for rules. So 2 hours now. So please, Aurélia.
No, I don't know about choosing the actors. It's a matter of taste, I think, and of whether someone feels emotional or not. That's what I was at least interested in. Let's say the main character of my film, and about the freedom. Well, I don't think there was much freedom for my actor. No, it was quite precise and specific. But he brought obviously his own talent and invention, and he also brought a very special kind of energy of his own that I sort of opened up to, that I didn't think I would, I didn't anticipate that. I didn't think, he would bring that, and it actually brought a lot to the movie without my really realizing, or I was only realizing it throughout making the film. That his own special kind of tenderness and even kind of special kind of humor. If you see my film on Monday, you'll understand that it's a paradox, because the character is quite, dramatic or tragic, and the actor brought his own sweetness and humor in a very delicate way, which actually I think it really enriched the character.
For me, it depends, but I must say that I never made what we call a casting. Because I did that as an assistant once, and I thought it was so horrible. Just like, it's horrible. People waiting in a waiting room and just selling themselves. For me, it's just really terrible. But most of the time, I want to film someone, even if he's not an actor, just because I like something, way of moving. singularity of his face. And he could be a professional or not. There is nothing dogmatic about that. But first, it comes from it's the real person that inspires me, the character. And so maybe yes. And concerning the freedom, when I began, I must say that there was not such freedom as in the last film, I Did Not Die. I think that freedom is something you have to fight for, and as you have to gagner, win. And as far as you are improving, you have more freedom. When you become more confident in what you're doing.
This is the freedom of the director or the actor?
The actor. The actor, yes.
I don't know if we are a group, I hope so, because Scott made a proclamation about it, but what's really true, because it's a fact, is that we use sometimes a lot of same actors in our movies. For example, Guillaume Verdier, Jean-Christophe Bouvet, Laurent Talon, myself, we are little in all this movie, and this is something I like, because when you look at Paul Kelly's movie, Fassbinder's movie, or even, I don't know, Raoul Walsh, when you watch a movie by Raoul Walsh from the 40s, you are pretty sure that Alan Hale will appear. If you ask yourself, how will appear? With what kind of mustache? What kind of beard? So it's very funny and exciting, because you know you have to see Wharton in a Ford movie, Wharton and things like that, and they always change the way they look, and I especially like when there are, like Aurélia said, there are two types of actors in my movie, at least, the friends and the professional actors. And I like the fact that the friends are my own Alan Hale. They can go from film to film, but never, sometimes with moustache, sometimes with beard, sometimes without sex, sometimes with another sex, always different.
Just yeah, I used a couple of friends in my film, and my editor had a theory that the one that is the least professional one was the best actress in the film.
So for me, it's for my film, I just looked around me, so I used Serge, I used Axel, I used my sister, but there was one professional actor too, that an actor we mentioned called Jean-Christophe Bouvet, which I really liked, especially in the Jean-Claude Guette movies. That's why I chose it.
He plays in the Jean-Claude Guette movie, but also in Paul Kelly's movie. And we call him a professional actor just because he plays in a lot of movies. Like
also plays in a very commercial.
Yeah, Luc Besson's movie Taxi is the father of Samina Seri, or he plays La Cité de la Peur with the new. But anyway, in the beginning, he was not a professional actor. He was never trained as an actor. His first movie was a kind of erotic movie after Sad, and then I won't explain his career, which is very exciting. But for example, he never made a single theater
lately.
What?
Recently, he made one. But
yeah, Clockwork Orange, the musical. Yeah,
yes,
but anyway, he's not professional in the traditional sense as having been trained in actor school, etc.
He was in Piala, Sous le Soleil de Satan.
He plays the devil.
The devil.
He's the one who kisses of death to Denisant, played by Depardieu. He's one of the great Piala scenes. And it was Jean-Charles Fitoussi can explain it better than I, because it's an obsession of Jacques Bouvet. When you meet him the first time, he's always telling the stories about the shooting of this Piala movie, because Piala was a terrible director, I mean very mean with the actor, terrible mean. And but when he was trying to play, when he was playing in fact, Depardieu and Piala sent him stones in his back. So it was really hurting, and they said very vulgar stuff because he's gay, and they kept on saying very hard stuff, and so he's been a little like it's his own crucifixion. If you talk to him about the Piala, he can go on for hours.
Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, it's actually nice hearing you guys talk, because I didn't hear one of the words that I always hear when people talk about, I guess, contemporary French cinema and even French cinema in the new wave, which is the word documentary. So I guess I want to be a little perverse and just ask you, what you feel about documentary. If it's something that's important for you, if you want to do it, if you don't want to do it.
I hate documentaries. Yeah. I'm against documentaries, and I think, like Bresson or Truffaut, that they should not be released in theaters. This is passionate. But I must confess that, having said so, I have never seen a Wiseman movie, I have never seen a Van der Koken movie, I have never seen any documentary, because I don't like this a priori. Yeah.
Why not?
I love documentaries. And someone said, I think Serge can say, who said that a great film or a film is also a documentary on its actors.
Non, un documentaire sur son tournage.
Répète.
Et peut-être aussi sur ses acteurs.
There are some, I'm sure you like the documentary by Marie-Claude Treilloux, for example.
Yeah, but this is the exception that confirms the rule.
There is, I think like Serge and Aurélia.
Well put. Any other questions? Yes.
You haven't got any handouts or brochures or anything about
Yeah, I have some flyers, which will.
Okay, my question is La France the one with Sylvie Testud?
Yes.
I saw it.
And you can also see her in The Idiot by Pierre Leon. Actually, maybe a nice way to wrap this up would be if everybody can say a little bit about what they're working on for their next project.
Well, yeah, I've been working on a second feature film project for some time. I started writing it before shooting my first film. I thought I was being clever and you know, it would accelerate the process, but this was 6 years ago, so obviously it didn't work. And I'm, you know, it's starting to be in financing and very slowly in casting, so hopefully we'll shoot it next year, maybe sometime, if ever. It's very, very different from my first film. That's what I think it's going to be. It's like a sentimental comedy. So my first film is over 20 years in Paris on one single character, and it's in a way sad. And the second film is 3 days in the countryside with many characters and sort of a comedy. So I'm trying to make the most, you know, biggest difference. But in a way, I'm sure it will be the same movie all over again, because, as you know, one always makes the same movie over and over again. I've been all the time in short films trying to make a completely different film, and then afterwards I look at them and I say, but it's the same again.
I Did Not Die is that's maybe kind of point in common with Romer, that I love serials and series, and I love because maybe I also just as maybe everybody in the group, I love Balzac, and I'm from the same town too, and I love this film continuing, and even if it's not the real sequel or prequel, but I like also when you see the old films, you can, as Serge said, see the same actors. So it's just like
single movie.
Yes, a very big single movie. I like this idea, and I've been ordered by a producer to make another type of movie, which should be a documentary, but which will not be a documentary. And I could take the sound. Yes, and I am writing the prequels and sequels of I Did Not Die, which itself.
I was not born. Because in New York, somebody said I was born to cry. It's Diane DiMucci. But anyway, my next movie, everything. If there is no major production catastrophe until October, I will shoot a movie called Tip Top in October, November. It's a kind of I won't tell it.
Well, I don't have a real defined project. I'm still writing, but I take a lot of time with music recently, so we'll see. But no production.
Any final notes, Miriam? Then I want to thank everyone on the panel. I want to thank Phil and everyone here at Columbia for inviting us, and all of you for being here in the audience.